Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, uncovering stories that shock, intrigue, and leave us questioning the world around us. In today's case, we bring you a gripping and twisted tale, a saga of power, opulence, and crime that connects the glamorous world of luxury cars with the dark underbelly of organized crime. This is the story of luxury cars and dirty money, the Mafia's taste for the high life. A tale of greed, deception, and the ruthless pursuit of status. This case will leave you questioning, how far will some go to maintain their lavish lifestyle? And what price must be paid when dirty money fuels extravagant dreams? Stay with us as we unravel the shocking story behind the Mafia's obsession with the high life. Alessandro Russo and Victor Santana were more than partners in crime. They were architects of a global empire built on stolen luxury cars and dirty money. But as their ambition grew, so did their mistakes, setting the stage for betrayal, murder, and a relentless investigation that would unravel their carefully constructed world. Alessandro Russo's rise to power was the stuff of legend, albeit one that thrived in shadows. Born into the gritty streets of Naples, his early years were steeped in hardship. He was the son of a dock worker who often struggled to make ends meet, and a mother who spent her days taking in laundry for the wealthier families of the city. But Alessandro had always harbored an uncanny ability to see beyond his circumstances. From an early age, he realized that survival in his world wasn't guaranteed by hard work or integrity. It was earned through boldness, cunning, and when necessary, ruthlessness. By the time Alessandro was in his early 20s, he had already carved out a reputation within the Italian mafia as a shrewd operator with an almost supernatural ability to turn a bad situation in his favor. It wasn't just his ambition that set him apart, though. Alessandro had a vision, one that blended the allure of wealth and status with the organized chaos of the criminal underworld. He didn't want to merely survive, he wanted to thrive, and in doing so, surround himself with the symbols of power and prestige that had once felt unattainable. In the mid-1990s, Alessandro took his first major step toward creating his empire. Leveraging his connections within the mafia, he opened Prestige Motors, a luxury car dealership in Milan. On the surface, the business catered to the wealthy elite, offering the most sought-after vehicles in the world. The pristine glass showroom glittered with Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and Bentleys, while high-profile clients were met with impeccable service and the promise of exclusivity. But beneath the sleek facade, Prestige Motors was far more than a dealership. It was a front for a vast criminal operation that blurred the lines between legitimate business and illegal enterprise. Alessandro's core operation revolved around stolen luxury cars. Vehicles were lifted from unsuspecting owners across Europe, often through sophisticated theft rings that used advanced technology to bypass security systems. Once acquired, the cars were given new identities, fake ownership documents, falsified serial numbers, and fresh paint jobs. To the untrained eye, they were indistinguishable from their legitimate counterparts. The stolen cars were then sold through the dealership at exorbitant prices, often to clients who were either too wealthy to care or too complicit to ask questions. But the operation didn't stop there. Alessandro had also mastered the art of using Prestige Motors as a money laundering hub. Proceeds from drug trafficking, arms deals, and other illicit activities flowed through the dealership, cleverly disguised as legitimate sales and transactions. Alessandro's charm and business acumen made him a darling of Milan's high society. He threw extravagant parties, rubbed elbows with politicians and celebrities, and cultivated an image of success that shielded him from suspicion. To the outside world, he was the epitome of a self-made entrepreneur. But within the mafia, he was something far more valuable, a rising star who had found a way to merge the world of high crime with the allure of wealth and luxury. However, Alessandro's ascent was not without its risks. His growing influence attracted attention not only from law enforcement but also from rival factions within the mafia. His competitors envied his success and suspected that his bold operations would eventually draw unwanted scrutiny. Alessandro, ever the strategist, knew this too. He was careful to insulate himself from his crimes, delegating the dirtiest work to trusted lieutenants and creating layers of bureaucracy that made it nearly impossible to tie him directly to any wrongdoing. The success of Prestige Motors seemed unstoppable, but there was one detail Alessandro could not control: the growing trail of evidence his empire left behind. Unbeknownst to him, detectives across Europe had started noticing a pattern. Expensive cars would vanish, only to resurface months later under new ownership. Insurance fraud, missing VIN numbers, and anonymous tips began pointing investigators toward a larger conspiracy. Alessandro's ability to operate in plain sight was his greatest strength, but it was also his most significant vulnerability. For years, he had convinced the world that Prestige Motors was a legitimate enterprise, but cracks in his facade were beginning to show. His hunger for power and the trappings of success had propelled him to incredible heights, but it also placed him directly in the crosshairs of those who were determined to bring him down. And as his empire continued to grow, so too did the web of lies, secrets, and enemies that threatened to unravel everything he had built. By the early 2000s, Alessandro Russo's ambitions had outgrown Italy. His burgeoning empire at Prestige Motors had earned him not only immense wealth, but also a dangerous level of notoriety. To maintain his growing demand for high-end vehicles, Alessandro forged a partnership that would take his operation to the next level. Victor Santana entered his life as both an asset and a liability. A notorious smuggler from South America, Victor had connections that stretched across continents. His reputation for ruthless efficiency made him the ideal partner for Alessandro's vision, but his reckless nature would also plant the seeds of chaos within the operation. Victor's network specialized in acquiring luxury cars in ways that made even seasoned criminals shudder. Using forged ownership papers, carjacking crews, and bribed customs officials, Victor ensured a steady supply of vehicles to Alessandro. Cars disappeared from affluent neighborhoods across Europe, often taken under circumstances so seamless that owners had no idea what had happened until it was too late. From secluded mansions in the French Riviera to busy streets in London, Victor's operations left no stone unturned. The stolen vehicles were transported to secret warehouses where their identities were erased. License plates were swapped, vehicle identification numbers, VINs were altered, and fake documents were meticulously crafted. Once rebranded, the cars were shipped to Prestige Motors, where Alessandro's team sold them to wealthy clients eager to flaunt their status symbols. Some buyers were legitimate, simply looking for the next luxury vehicle to add to their collection. Others, often high-ranking figures in the underworld themselves, were fully aware of the car's origins, but turned a blind eye for the sake of exclusivity. With Victor's help, Alessandro expanded his reach beyond Italy. Prestige Motors began exporting cars to private collectors in Russia, the Middle East, and even parts of Asia. These transactions were carefully hidden behind layers of offshore accounts and shell companies, ensuring that authorities had little chance of tracking the funds. The partnership was lucrative, and the duo seemed untouchable. But success on this scale rarely goes unnoticed. Detective Maria Moretti, a seasoned investigator based in Milan, had been tracking a series of high-profile car thefts for years. Her expertise in unraveling complex criminal networks had earned her a reputation as one of the sharpest minds in the force. When she began noticing a troubling pattern, her instincts told her this was more than just a string of random crimes. Maria's investigation led her to Prestige Motors. At first glance, the dealership appeared spotless. Alessandro's meticulous bookkeeping and the legitimate arm of his business created a facade of legality. But the deeper Maria dug, the more anomalies she found. Sales figures didn't match the company's reported profits, and certain transactions seemed designed to obscure the origins of the vehicles being sold. She began to piece together the puzzle, realizing that Prestige Motors wasn't just selling cars, it was hiding something far more sinister. As Maria worked tirelessly to gather evidence, Alessandro and Victor were unaware of the growing scrutiny. Their focus remained on expansion, constantly looking for ways to outmaneuver competitors and stay ahead of the law. But cracks in their operation began to emerge. Victor, emboldened by his newfound wealth, grew increasingly reckless. He flaunted his lifestyle on social media, posing with expensive cars and exotic locations, unknowingly drawing attention to himself and the organization. One particular deal raised Maria's suspicions further. A high-end Lamborghini had disappeared from Paris and reappeared months later in an auction hosted by Prestige Motors. The VIN had been altered, and the ownership history seemed legitimate, but Maria noticed discrepancies that others had missed. She began tracing the vehicle's journey, uncovering a network of shell companies and false identities. Alessandro's operation thrived on secrecy, but Maria's relentless pursuit threatened to expose the entire scheme. She knew she was only scratching the surface of a far-reaching criminal enterprise, one that likely involved more players than she could yet identify. Each new piece of evidence brought her closer to the truth, but it also placed her in increasing danger. Unaware of the storm brewing around him, Alessandro continued to push the boundaries of his empire. But Maria's investigation was closing in, and it was only a matter of time before the perfect image he had built began to crumble. The deeper she dug, the more she realized the scale of what she was up against. This wasn't just about stolen cars, it was about power, corruption, and the lengths one man would go to protect his empire. In 2009, Alessandro Russo faced one of the greatest tests of his criminal empire. His operation had reached unprecedented heights, with Prestige Motors thriving as a front for stolen cars and money laundering. Yet, as his business expanded, so did his hunger for power and prestige. He wasn't content with simply running a profitable empire. He wanted to cement his name among the elites of the underworld. This ambition led him to orchestrate one of the most daring heists of his career, the theft of a one-of-a-kind Bugatti worth millions. The Bugatti, known as the La Lumiere, was a masterpiece of engineering and art. It was owned by a reclusive billionaire in Monaco who prided himself on its rarity. The car was more than a vehicle, it was a symbol of untouchable wealth and exclusivity. For Alessandro, stealing it wasn't just about the money, it was a statement, a show of dominance that would solidify his reputation among the most dangerous and influential figures in the criminal world. The heist was meticulously planned. Alessandro brought in an elite crew of specialists to pull it off. His team included master hackers, experienced drivers, and an insider who provided critical information about the billionaire's security arrangements. Every detail of the operation was scrutinized, from the timing of the guards' shifts to the specific vulnerabilities in the estate's high-tech alarm system. The plan was simple in theory, but immensely complex in execution. On the night of the heist, the team moved with precision. Under the cover of darkness, they infiltrated the billionaire's estate. Using advanced hacking tools, they disabled the security cameras and bypassed the electronic locks on the garage. Within minutes, the Bugatti was loaded onto a truck and spirited away into the night. By the time the theft was discovered the next morning, the car had already disappeared across international borders. For Alessandro, the heist was a triumph. The Bugatti was smuggled to a secret warehouse where it was prepped for resale. Its distinctive features were carefully altered to avoid detection, and a false history was created to pass it off as legitimate. Alessandro intended to auction it privately to a wealthy buyer who would pay a fortune for the prestige of owning such a rare vehicle, no questions asked. However, the heist also attracted the kind of attention Alessandro had long sought to avoid. The theft of the Bugatti made headlines around the world, drawing scrutiny from international law enforcement agencies, including Interpol. Investigators quickly linked the heist to a string of high-profile car thefts across Europe, and Alessandro's network began to appear on their radar. The first major mistake came from Victor Santana, Alessandro's partner and smuggling expert. Known for his flamboyant lifestyle, Victor couldn't resist flaunting the spoils of their operation. Weeks after the heist, he was photographed driving the stolen Bugatti in an exclusive resort in the Caribbean. The image, posted online by an unwitting tourist, went viral, raising alarms among investigators. The photograph was a smoking gun. Interpol began connecting the dots, tracing the Bugatti's movements and uncovering leads that pointed directly to Alessandro's operation. The car, which had been intended to symbolize Alessandro's untouchable status, was now a liability that threatened to expose his entire empire. Unaware of how closely investigators were circling, Alessandro continued with business as usual. The Bugatti was quietly sold to a Russian oligarch for an astronomical sum. The proceeds funneled through a labyrinth of offshore accounts. But the walls were closing in. Authorities began targeting Alessandro's lower-level operatives, pressuring them for information. Small cracks appeared in the tightly controlled network he had built, and whispers of betrayal began to circulate. Detective Maria Moretti, who had been tracking Prestige Motors for years, saw the theft of the Bugatti as an opportunity. The high-profile nature of the crime meant resources were being poured into the investigation, giving her access to tools and intelligence she hadn't had before. She began building a case piece by piece, determined to bring down the man who had evaded justice for so long. Alessandro's victory was short-lived. While he basked in the success of the heist, Maria and her team were uncovering the layers of deception that shielded his empire. The Bugatti, once a symbol of his dominance, had become the thread that could unravel everything. The stakes had never been higher, and Alessandro was running out of time to cover his tracks. Victor Santana had always been Alessandro Russo's wildcard. While his expertise in smuggling had propelled Prestige Motors to unprecedented heights, his impulsive behavior and reckless need for attention had also made him a glaring liability. After the Bugatti fiasco, Alessandro's trust in Victor was irreparably damaged. The viral photograph of Victor with the stolen car had brought law enforcement dangerously close to their operation, and Alessandro knew the spotlight was now on him. He needed to clean house, and Victor was at the top of his list. Victor, however, was no fool. He could sense the shift in Alessandro's demeanor, the way their once tight partnership had grown strained and cold. He realized that his mistake had made him a target, and in the Mafia, mistakes weren't forgiven, they were punished. Paranoia set in, and Victor began making plans of his own. If Alessandro wanted him gone, he'd strike first by turning to the authorities. In a desperate bid to save himself, Victor contacted Interpol, offering to cooperate in exchange for immunity. He provided them with a trove of evidence, encrypted files, financial records, and details of Alessandro's operation that even Detective Maria Moretti hadn't uncovered. It was a goldmine of information, exposing not just Prestige Motors but the intricate web of offshore accounts and Mafia connections that made Alessandro untouchable for so long. Maria, already deep into her investigation, was stunned by the scale of Victor's revelations. The files painted a vivid picture of how Prestige Motors operated as a front for organized crime. They detailed how stolen cars were funneled into the legitimate market, how bribes kept customs officials and local law enforcement at bay, and how millions of euros were laundered through fake sales and shell companies. For the first time, she had the ammunition she needed to bring Alessandro down. But Victor's betrayal came at a cost. Alessandro's network was vast, and his reach extended into places Victor hadn't anticipated. Despite being under Interpol's protection, Victor's location was compromised. One evening, at what was supposed to be a secure safe house, Victor was found dead. The official cause was listed as a burglary gone wrong, but everyone involved in the investigation knew better. It was a message from Alessandro, a chilling reminder of what happened to those who crossed him. Victor's death sent shockwaves through Maria's team. The loss of their key informant was a devastating blow, but Victor had left behind enough evidence to keep the investigation alive. Among the files was a list of high-profile clients who had purchased cars from Prestige Motors, many of whom were prominent figures in politics, business, and organized crime. The list was a double-edged sword. It provided crucial leads, but it also revealed the extent of Alessandro's influence and the powerful allies who might protect him. Alessandro, meanwhile, was fully aware that his empire was under siege. He doubled down on his efforts to protect himself, tightening his inner circle and destroying any evidence that could implicate him. Accounts were emptied, warehouses were abandoned, and employees who posed a potential risk were quietly silenced. Yet, despite his best efforts, Alessandro couldn't undo the damage Victor had caused. Maria's team faced mounting pressure to act quickly. They knew that Alessandro was erasing his tracks, and if they didn't move soon, he would slip through their fingers. But the operation to take him down had to be flawless. Alessandro was a master manipulator, and any misstep could cost them the chance to bring him to justice. As Maria pored over Victor's files, she found a critical lead: plans for an upcoming high-stakes auction hosted by Prestige Motors. The event was set to feature rare and exotic cars, drawing wealthy buyers from around the world. It was the perfect opportunity for Alessandro to launder his remaining assets and disappear into obscurity. Maria saw the auction as their best chance to catch him in the act, but it was also a gamble. If Alessandro caught wind of their plan, he would undoubtedly vanish before they could act. The tension within Maria's team was palpable as they prepared for the sting operation. Every detail had to be precise, every move coordinated to perfection. They knew Alessandro was dangerous, a man who had spent years outsmarting the law. The auction would either mark the end of his reign or prove, once again, that he was untouchable. As the date of the auction approached, Alessandro remained confident. Despite the setbacks, He believed he had outmaneuvered everyone, just as he always had. But Maria was ready, and for the first time in his career, Alessandro would face an adversary as relentless and cunning as himself. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown, and the outcome would determine whether Alessandro's empire would crumble or endure. The night of the auction was a spectacle of wealth and exclusivity. Held in a lavish villa on the outskirts of Milan, the event was invitation only, attended by some of the richest and most influential individuals in the world. The estate was adorned with glittering chandeliers, a red carpet leading to the entrance, and an air of opulence that masked the darker dealings behind the event. For Alessandro Russo, this was the culmination of years of work, a chance to liquidate his remaining assets and disappear before law enforcement could catch up. The auction featured an extraordinary lineup of rare vehicles, including a pristine Rolls-Royce Phantom, a vintage Aston Martin, and the centerpiece of the evening, a limited edition Ferrari worth millions. Alessandro had ensured that every detail of the event exuded legitimacy. Documents were meticulously forged, the vehicles appeared flawless, and high-profile buyers mingled in an atmosphere of luxury and secrecy. Unbeknownst to Alessandro, the event was under intense surveillance. Detective Maria Moretti and her team had spent weeks preparing for this moment, embedding undercover agents among the staff and even posing as potential buyers. Surveillance vans surrounded the property, and hidden cameras captured every transaction, every interaction, and every move Alessandro made. It was their most ambitious operation yet, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. As the auction began, Alessandro worked the room with his usual charm, greeting guests and ensuring the evening ran smoothly. To him, this was a farewell performance, a final act before vanishing into the shadows. His plan was simple. Once the auction concluded, he would use the proceeds to secure a new identity and disappear, leaving his empire behind as a ghost. But Maria had planned for this. Her team had identified the offshore accounts Alessandro intended to use and intercepted communications from his inner circle. Every detail of his escape plan was laid bare, and the net was closing around him. The challenge now was timing. Alessandro was cautious, and any sign of trouble would send him running. Maria had to strike at the exact moment when he felt safest. As the bidding for the Ferrari reached its climax, tension within Maria's team was at its peak. They monitored the flow of money, tracing the transactions as they occurred in real time. Alessandro's confidence grew as the bids skyrocketed, unaware that the very systems he had used to cover his tracks were now exposing him. The turning point came when Alessandro stepped away from the crowd to finalize the transfer of funds. He entered a private room, flanked by two of his most trusted bodyguards, and began coordinating with his associates. Maria's team moved swiftly, disabling the estate's security systems and sealing off all exits. The operation was precise, leaving no room for error. In the main hall, guests began to notice the sudden shift in atmosphere. The red carpet of luxury was replaced by the blaring sirens of law enforcement. Armed officers stormed the villa, securing the premises and detaining attendees. Some panicked while others remained silent, their involvement in Alessandro's operation etched across their faces. Alessandro, realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to escape through a hidden passage leading to the estate's underground garage. But Maria had anticipated this move. As he entered the passage, he was met with a wall of officers, weapons drawn, their eyes fixed on the man who had evaded justice for so long. The arrest was swift, but the moment carried a weight years in the making. Alessandro's empire, built on deception, power, and greed, had crumbled in an instant. The man who once seemed untouchable was now in handcuffs, his carefully curated world dismantled piece by piece. The fallout from the operation was immense. Dozens of buyers and associates were arrested, and the evidence collected from the auction exposed a vast criminal network that stretched across continents. Maria, though exhausted, felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had spent years chasing Alessandro, and now his reign was over. But even as Alessandro was led away, his expression remained defiant. To him, this was not the end but a setback, a temporary pause in his game of cat and mouse. Maria knew the battle against organized crime was far from over, but for now she had won a victory that would echo through the corridors of justice for years to come. As always, thank you for watching Mystery Minds. This case reminds us that greed often comes with a heavy price, and no one is untouchable when their crimes catch up with them. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.